Hi, I'm Dexter Gelfand, and I'm here to give another talk on my subject of therapeutic spiritual counseling. And this will be another brief talk about the subject of the personas we take on, the me's, the artificial personalities that we become at times to greater or lesser degree with greater or lesser consistency. Okay? Now, the first thing I want to do is just state the fundamentals that any persona we take on, we all do this. It's very observable in other people that they're being a certain personality, whether it's all the time or some of the time. But anyway, basically what happens is when we're in a situation where we're not comfortable experiencing, confronting, and engaging with, we sort of withdraw and we default to some artificial persona because we don't feel comfortable being ourselves. I think it's something like if you have a problem with a business and you speak to somebody from customer service or the person at the cash register or whatever, and you explain that you want something different than the way it is, or a bank, whatever it is, and they say, well, our policy is, unfortunately, this is our policy, okay? Again, it's a default back to a standard form rather than just regarding the moment, being in the moment and being present and dealing with each moment as the individual thing that it is. You know, the other thing to do is default to some sort of pattern or form. As I said in a recent lecture, when the spirit reigns, the form appears. You know, when we feel overwhelmed or we don't know what to do, we sort of withdraw, and as I said, we default to something. We default to some sort of persona, some sort of artificial me. It's sort of one of our policies we take on, so it's a substitute for being present. And of course, that is a very compromised situation. We don't want that. We want to be able to be comfortable in our own skin, as you would say, in any situation. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to explain to you, is that this is a matter of defaulting when feeling like you can't deal with something or you're overwhelmed. Okay, now the other point I want to make is more of a instructional or technical point, but as I've explained before, I have techniques for deconstructing personas that we take on. Persona deconstruction is the name of one of my techniques. But one thing that is not well understood, if at all, I'm sure there are some people that understand this. Alan Walter is one researcher of spiritual processing that recognized this point, is that we project personalities onto people, and we project a personality that says, this is who you are to me, who you are to be to me, and how I regard you as and what I regard you as. And we also send out a projection of, this is who I am to you. You are to recognize me as being this default pattern of personality. And we do this to get attention, to get love, to prevail in adversarial situations, to get sympathy, to be safe, those sort of things. Okay? Well, in terms of counseling or successfully helping somebody process a me, a persona, another word that's commonly used is an identity, or in some practices it's called a valence. But in any case, another thing that should be known about this, if one is going to help another person to deconstruct these things and fully process them, is that there are basically two situations of taking on personas. One is when you elect to take on a persona, or in encountering some forceful situation. Okay, then there is the other situation, which I was just speaking of, which is personality image projections, where somebody else is imposing or projecting that you are a certain me, a certain persona, and they project that onto you or make you feel that you are that way. Okay, those are two different situations. Defaulting to that persona because you choose to take it on as the best default you can think of in the moment, in a crisis or in a situation of being overwhelmed. And the other situation of somebody is imposing that persona onto you. So if you're going to take the role of a counselor, as I do with my therapeutic spiritual counseling, the first question to ask when encountering evidence of a persona, or having you or whoever the participant is working with me express or acknowledge that there is a persona that they're recognizing that they are stuck with. The question to ask before knowing which way to go with that is, okay, does this seem to be a persona that you took on through some circumstance, or does it seem to be a persona that was imposed or projected onto you by another person? And whichever that is, if it's projected or imposed onto you by another person, then the way to resolve it is different. It involves fully recognizing where it came from, who it came from. It involves letting go of it and letting it return to the sender, the person who projected it onto you. There's more steps involved than doing that, but that is the essence of that process, if that image or persona was in fact imposed onto you by some other person, or is imposed onto you by some other person. If it's the other situation where you took it on because in your environment or your palette or arsenal of immediate default personas that seem to be available, or other personas that you saw around you, you picked this one to be in order to present a me when you felt you could not be present yourself, okay? Or that you were better off not being yourself. You couldn't be present, essentially. So there is a situation of taking it on as your own decision and having someone else project or impose it onto you. Now understand that either of these situations does involve some personal choice and decision, and that is to be resolved accordingly. But if it is the situation, if it is not the situation where somebody else projects it onto you, then it's a situation where you chose to take it on. The technique I would use is different. I would use my persona deconstruction procedure. If it is the situation where it seems to have been imposed on you by some identifiable other person or persona, then that would be the personality image projection procedure. So it is an important step to find out, once a persona is discovered, whether it is taken on somewhat willingly or whether it's taken on because it is imposed from another source. Because the correct way of resolving and ridding oneself of defaulting to this persona is going to be different depending on how it was taken on. But it's good to also understand that as an individual, that these are the two sources. These are the two ways that you take on personas. You do become what people impose or project onto you sometimes. And in my saying that, chances are you're recognizing some of this occurs with you. You might be recognizing a persona or two, probably one that's standing out right now. And if we talk about a persona that you have chosen to take on, that you default to in certain situations, rather than being comfortable in your own skin and just simply being calm and relaxed and really present, that also might bring to mind a particular persona that you find yourself falling into being. In either case, I can help you with that. The techniques exist. And if you have any questions or have any interest in taking this up with me, by all means, get in touch. Thanks for listening.